Richard Dawkins announced himself as a cultural Christian. So then one of the things that makes me ask is something like, well, what is it that the West has right, that the enemies of the West have wrong, that's percolating at the bottom of all of this mess, that's driving what? That's driving the relativistic arguments of the pro-immigration types, but that's also fulminating this terrible clash of cultures that we unsurprisingly see emerging on our streets. It's like, so the question first is like, what the hell's driving the massive immigration into the West? Because we see it in Canada, maybe worse than anywhere else at the moment, or at a more rapid rate than anywhere else. Canada is so damn peaceful, it's hard to destabilize it, but we're working hard on that. So what's driving this? Is it the insistence? Is it this ideological insistence?
It's a lot of things. One is, as I've warned about for a long time, one is something that isn't inevitable, but is hard to resist, which is the simple ease of movement in the 21st century, the relative cheapness of travel compared to any previous century, and the knowledge through the devices we have in our pockets around the globe. I mean, 3 billion people are on WhatsApp alone. The ability of people anywhere in the world to discover the life of anyone else in the world easily. And add to that the fact that most countries in the world are not even remotely approximating either the safety or the wealth available in 21st century Canada, for instance, or Britain. And it's inevitable that a lot of people will want that. Now, as I've said for years, just because they may want it does not mean that Western liberal democracies can remotely be the place where everybody who wants a better life can or should go. It's simply impossible. And you just crunch the numbers on people in sub-Saharan Africa who want to move into Europe, for instance. And if that happened, if the third of sub-Saharan Africa who want to move moved, Europe would totally unrecognizable. Now, the second thing that comes from that is that it is extremely difficult for politicians to maintain their borders. And I think this is highly regrettable, because I think the only way in which, among other things, you can have an actual asylum system where you actually take in those unusual cases where asylum should be needed, just disappear once you have illegal migration every day coming in on boats, or as in the case of America, millions of people walking across the southern border in the last 4 years. And add to that the fact that, as was famously said in 1968 by somebody, it's the easiest thing to put off any difficult decision you have to make today and leave it for your successors to address, all the time making it harder for your successors. But I said this to a European politician some years ago when they said that they were going to deport the 1 million illegals that were in their country. I said, how are you going to do it? Because you and I know that on day one, if you rounded up everyone who is legally in the country and put them on buses, trains, boats, the first woman or child crying would be on the front page of every newspaper the next morning. And by day 2, you would have to stop because of public pressure. It seems to be a reality for the time being. By the way, until such a time emerges, and it could, where the society says we don't give a damn anymore, we don't give a damn. That may well happen. But until that does happen, countries are absolutely incapable, politicians are incapable of answering this question. Then you have a follow-on one, which addresses what you mentioned about Richard Dawkins, among other things, which is America. It's not quite true to say that America was a society based on an idea, but it's a nice idea. America was based on an idea, but the idea came about because of the people who founded the Republic, the United States of America. And if they hadn't...
Englishmen.
Right. If they had have been from somewhere else, even a different denomination, the United States would be very different. However, as far as states founded on an idea goes, America is probably the nearest to that. European nations, Britain, are not based on an idea. They were not based on an idea. Now, that isn't to say that they don't have very distinct cultures. And my word, the different cultures across Europe are so different that everyone jokes about their neighbors and regards their neighbor in the neighboring European country as being wildly different from them. To an outsider, it seems preposterous that the Swedes and the Norwegians would have distinctions between them, but they do. But I say this to say that Europe and Britain was made up of ethnic identities. And those ethnic identities had ideas, of course. But even in Britain, you have the Welsh, you have the Scots, you have the English, the Northern Irish, the Irish. How do you integrate into that? How do you do it? Does anyone know? And the answer is no. Have some people? I'd say yes. Have a majority? It doesn't look that way to me. And so this is just a bomb underneath the societies in Europe in particular. It has been about ethnicity. We don't like things about being about ethnicity, so we say it's about an idea. But all my adult life, this idea has been so hard for anyone to pin down that they've just failed at it time and time again. I'm old enough to remember when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, and I contributed to a book that he edited about being British, what Britishness was. That was 20 years ago. And Britain is no closer to defining that today than it was 20 years ago. People say things like Britishness is about queuing or fair play. And that is so completely inadequate to the task at hand. But the other one that can come along with this, and this is one of the ones that white working class communities in the UK deeply resent in particular, is the you don't have a culture, which is one of the other nice, it's one of the nice things that race baiters of all shapes have been doing for years at these people. You don't have a culture. It's what I wrote about in The War on the West, the jabbing at majority populations. And if you do have a culture, it's not a good one, or it's a rapaciously evil one, or it's one that's only to be described through the lens of colonialism or slavery or racism or institutional racism or patriarchy or whatever. And they've just done this for years. There has been what I showed in my last book to be this, for instance, why do all the holy places of the British people keep being attacked, literally and metaphorically? Why does Winston Churchill, the great hero of the British nation, keep on being attacked by people? Because they want to hurt these people. They want to hurt the people who revere them. They literally want to strip their gods from them. They want to defile the holy places of the culture. You might say, well, why do you want to do that? Revenge for some people, supremacy of a different kind for others, weakness among others, false adventure, cowardice, going along with the tenor of the times, however bad that direction of travel happens to be. But I said recently, before these riots happened, I said, it would be, and I might have said this to you in private before, Jordan, but I say it would be madness if people from the Indian subcontinent made up 3% of your population, it would be madness to try to demoralize that population or to try to find ways to just say that they were nothing and never had been anything, and it was sort of best if they just tried to sidle through their lives without harming anyone. Why would you do that to 3% of the population? Among other things, it's rude, it's cruel, it's unusual, and that 3% of the population is a significant amount of the population. You don't want to demoralize 3% of the population. Okay. Why would you do that to a majority? Who is so insane that they want to do this to majority populations? And the answer seems to be, well, we're finding out. We are finding out.